Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to see you. And I'm delighted to begin part two of the program by introducing Omer Friedlander, the author of The Man Who Sold Air in the Holy Land. He was born in Jerusalem in 1994 and grew up in Tel Aviv with his parents, who are scholars, and his twin brother, Elam, who is a jazz musician. Omar's grandfather, Sam Friedlander, is a renowned historian of the Holocaust. Omer received his, BA in English literature from the University of Cambridge in England and an MFA from Boston University, where he was supported by the Saul Bellow Fellowship. He was also awarded the Starbucks Scholarship at NYU's MFA program in creative writing. His short stories have won numerous awards and have been published in the United States, Canada, and France, and Israel. The Man Who Sold Air in the Holy Land has been racking up rave reviews. And as Robin mentioned, is the year selection for the One Bay, One Book program in San Francisco. The Man Who Sold Air in the Holy Land will soon be followed by his first novel, The Glass Golem, which will be published by Random House. Currently, he lives in New York City, and we're happy that he can join us today. Now, for some program details. While Robin asks Omer some questions about his stories, you are welcome to reserve a place in line to ask a question yourself. You can do this by raising your electronic hand at any time. We will turn to your questions soon. The audience Q&A period will not be recorded, so feel free to ask whatever you like. To raise your electronic hand, click on the button labeled Reactions, then choose the option Raise Hand. Thank you. And please go ahead, Robin.
Thank you, Marge. And let me bring on Omer Friedlander. Hello, there you are.
Hi.
Hello, welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much
Great
for
to be here.
coming today.
Thank you so much. I love your background.
Oh, well, you inspired it. Your story inspired it. So I loved your story collection. And as you heard from a number of people, they did too. I love the humor and the poignancy and the history and the background. And I enjoyed meeting and thinking about your characters. So thank you so much. So let me start with the most obvious question. These stories are set mostly in Israel, and you're Israeli, and Hebrew is your native language. How did it come about that this collection is in English?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think every time I answer it, it kind of, I realize maybe some new things, but I guess part of the reason is some of the distance that English allows me from what I'm writing about. So I think because when I started writing about Israel, I was actually not living there anymore. I'd moved for school, so I was already living away from it, and then I started kind of going back and writing about it. So I needed that distance of, I guess, place. And also of language. I think there's something about it, even the most familiar aspects of it, like in the title story, The Man Who Sold Air in the Holy Land. So writing about a place like the Dolfinarium or the neighborhood in Dizengoff, and that's where I grew up. So I needed to find a way to kind of see it in a new way. And I think writing in English allowed me some of that, but also even doing research about places that I thought I knew, or time periods that I thought I knew, and kind of discovering new things, I think allowed me a kind of a new way in. So I think, yeah, but part of the reason is the distance, and another more kind of maybe practical reason is also it's a different audience, and which I kind of have also conflicted feelings about, because I would love for the book to be translated to Hebrew, and I hope it will be. It is kind of, it's being translated to different languages, which are kind of surprising, or more surprising, like Turkish, for example, or Italian, but not Hebrew yet. So that's the short answer.
Thank you for that. If it is translated to Hebrew, would you be the likely translator?
I don't think so. I think I'd work with someone, hopefully, who I think every translator probably works differently. And some are, maybe they ask the author questions, and some just kind of go for it. So for some translations, like the Dutch one that came out, I have it here actually. Looks like this. I didn't hear anything, so I have no idea, and I can't read Dutch, obviously. So let's hope. And then, from the Turkish translator, for example, we corresponded a lot, and she had very good questions. So I would like to be involved if I can, but I probably wouldn't translate on my own, because I think it is its own art form.
Yes, yes. Some of your stories have wonderful family stories underlying them. And I wondered if you would share the family story about your mother's family moving to Canada that inspired Walking Shiva.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was interested, I guess, in this idea of grieving and of mourning someone who you're not quite sure is dead, and this kind of limbo state of grieving, which I think might be, in a way, maybe more difficult than knowing for sure in some cases. But yeah, so the kind of family myth or story, who knows how true it is that on my mother's side, so my I don't know who it would be, great grandparent maybe, moved from Belarus to Canada for work, I think in the kind of fur industry or something. And he left his wife and his children behind for a while, and they were supposed to join him at a specific time on a specific ship, after he'd kind of established himself a little bit there. And so they were getting ready to board this ship, and one of the kids, who was a violinist, she forgot the violin, which was kind of very precious to the family. So they didn't end up boarding the ship. They went back for the violin and missed it. And so that ship sailed away without them, and it actually sunk and drowned, and everyone died on board that ship. And my great grandfather, who was in Canada, didn't know that they hadn't boarded the ship. It was obviously difficult to communicate instantly. So he was convinced that they were on this ship, and that they had perished along with the other passengers. So he sat Shiva for them, and then they arrived, a week later, or however long it was, on the next ship. So I thought it was a kind of crazy story, and kind of imagining his grief, and then seeing them, and this idea of a kind of limbo state of grieving. So that kind of, I guess, got me thinking about those topics, and led eventually to Walking Shiva.
Thank you for that. I thought that people would like to hear that story. The Holocaust is in the background of some of your stories, but you address it indirectly rather than head on. And I understand from what you've said that that's a deliberate choice and a personal philosophy about how to address the Holocaust in writing or in literature. And can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. I think it is very difficult, and I think whenever I tried to write about it directly, I couldn't, in a way that felt true, and it felt sort of it wasn't working on a lot of different levels, I think, when I was writing about it directly. um and so yeah, so I did think that writing indirectly was a way to do it. And one of I guess you talked about a kind of guiding philosophy or point of view. Then there's this quote that I like by Italo Calvino, and he quotes Greek mythology, and he says that the only hero in Greek mythology that was able to defeat the Medusa, the woman with the snakes, was Perseus, because he didn't look directly at her, because whoever looked directly at the Medusa was turned to stone. So what he did was he looked at the reflection in his shield, the Medusa, and then he was able to defeat her. And I was thinking of that quote and this idea of a kind of lightness in writing and an indirectness. And I think writing about the Holocaust is kind of directly, it does sort of petrify and turn to stone in some ways, at least when I try to write about it. So the stories that do deal with it, they either deal with the kind of the memory of the Holocaust, or they deal with it in a kind of more absurdist way, and also, I guess, with the memory in certain ways. But in a story like the Sephardi Survivor, which I think actually, in a way, through absurdity and through humor about tragedy, I think you're actually able to reach the reader, the audience, in a way that they kind of let go of some of their defenses. I think if you hear just about, if you just hear the numbers, or if you just hear statistics, it doesn't really, you can't really comprehend it. So maybe a way to write about it is to use humor and to use surrealism or absurdity, and to kind of find a way to get at the more human, intimate aspect of it.
The Sephardi Survivor seemed very successful in that way. And I loved the initial premise of it, which seemed to make such sense, that Sephardi children are still children, and on Yom HaShoah Day, they would want to bring a survivor for show and tell, and feel put out if they didn't have one.
Right.
I love that premise. So in our book club, we've read a number of books about objects that have meaning to people. And you're very interested in objects as a writer, like the tape recorder in Altazaken, or the high heels in the story High Heels. What interests you or intrigues you about objects?
Yeah, I am really interested in objects, and this is also something, I guess, that I'm still interested in, because some parts of what I'm working on now with the novel are interested in an object. But I'm interested in High Heels. I guess it's thinking about the stories behind an object that we can invent, and the kind of way it can be a container for history or memory. So the high heels are sort of, it's unclear how true it is, but they are, the father tells his son that they belong to, this ballerina, and I like the idea of inventing stories to do with the objects, and the kind of hope it gives him, and the disappointment when he realizes maybe he's been kind of been telling him, I wouldn't say lies, but kind of tall tales. And so I was interested in that, and I think it is related to your last question, because it's also a way of kind of writing about the memory of the Holocaust indirectly. So I have these scenes of the dancer interweaved with the story in the kind of shoe store and night climbing. And I think because it stays in the realm of maybe this happened, maybe it didn't, even though it's based on a real dancer, it gives me some freedom. And with Altizachen, I liked the earlier comment. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but about they're losers. I think I am interested in writing about these characters that are, yeah, I guess losers is one way of putting it, or kind of outcasts, or they feel like they don't belong in some ways. And I think the Altizachen they're strange characters. And I was interested in the way that they collect objects that they fix and sell and all that. And it's almost kind of like a dying profession. They hardly wander around anymore. And so I like this idea of a kind of way of life that's slowly disappearing. And writing about that, along with the object of the tape recorder, which is kind of more about the memory of their father that is also slowly kind of disappearing.
In that story and in many others, one of the things that I really enjoyed was the fairy tale, fable-like quality of the stories. And I wondered, is there something about fairy tales and fables that you find especially appealing?
Yeah, I do. I think I didn't realize that I was interested in it until one of my mentors, Sigrid Nunez, who taught at Boston University when I was there, she said, "Oh, you're interested in fairy tales," and I didn't realize I was sort of I was interested in them, and I think part of her comment was also the reason why I kind of put together this collection. I realized that I was interested in the same things. So the fairy tale element was one thing that kind of tied some of the stories together, and there were obviously there's place and lots of different things, but I think she helped me realize that. Yeah, I think part of it comes from my dad, who he's an academic, a philosopher, and he kind of as a hobby collects all these old children's books, and he would show them to me and my brother and read from them. So I think that was some of my first experience with books in general. And I think many people, their first experience with books is obviously children's stories and fairy tales. But I think they've had this kind of impact on me. And there's something about the flatness of the stories and the symmetry and all these kinds of almost like a magical quality that's told in a very straight tone that I was really interested in.
Definitely comes across. So I'm going to thank you. And I have more questions, but I'm going to pause here and turn to audience questions.